because it was so similar to a topic I'd once researched for this very programme. It was the predicament of being a Conservative in Scotland, a predicament which, of course, arose as a result of the 1997 election.
The votes cast for each candidate were as follows. Linda Margaret Clark, Scottish Labour Party, 19,675. Malcolm Leslie Rifkind, Scottish Conservative and Unionist, 14,813.
So the Foreign Secretary Malcolm Rifkind, like the Scottish Secretary Michael Forsyth, the Trade Secretary Ian Lang, loses his seat. There will be no Conservative MPs from Scotland in the next Parliament.
Well, it was my interest in the survival of Scottish Conservatism after that particular rout, which took me 4 years ago to the border country of Dumfries, where I tried to track down some members of this relatively rare species.
The Tory party just now in Scotland is a bit of a spent force. I don't believe it's completely moribund. I think it could come again. But it needs to get younger people in. It's completely dominated by older people with very fixed ideas on what to do to win political power.
Are there people in Dumfries now who'd admit to being Tory at all?
Yes, I think they would, yeah. I think you could point them out quite easily as well, you know.
What would they look like?
They would be, generally speaking, over 70.
But was such age pessimism justified? A Cardiff conference paper intriguingly entitled Young Scottish Conservatives, Narratives from the Margins of Society, certainly suggested otherwise. I quickly learnt that its author, Antje Bednarek, now a PhD student at Aberdeen University, was originally from East Germany. I also found when we met up in the anteroom of the council chamber that she'd been surprised by the local reaction to the subject of her study.
Most of the time when I said what my topic is, young Scottish Conservatives, and people, usually they just laugh, or they say, well, there aren't any, right? And then I realised, there's something going on. And
because, of course, in 1997, in that election, there wasn't a single Scottish seat which was Conservative.
Yeah, exactly.
Did they talk about that time as a traumatic moment?
Yeah, it's very much, to me, it seems like a story of a mythological beginning, you know. So this, for them, was the day they were wiped out. And so it kind of gives them the sense of unity, I think. And it's something that they keep referring to. And, you know, we must be strong. Remember, there was this dark day and we still made it. We still survived. And remember 1997. It's a little bit like that.
So you start on your research. The first job, of course, in this research is to find your subjects. How do you go about finding them?
It was difficult. I knew that my own university has a Conservative and Unionist association, but I didn't know how to get in touch with them. And there were problems with their membership at the time. Eventually, it was through a friend who knew someone who was in the rowing team, who knew someone who was Conservative. And then, so they just referred me on and on until I finally met someone who actually was a Conservative. So it's like
trying to contact members of a secret society.
Yeah, well, they are a little bit protective about themselves because they've had so much bad press in the past. It was interesting from the start how they kept referring me on. I got the impression that it was a little bit like adhering to a chain of command. So the person that I knew from the friend was quite low in the chain, so he needed to ask the next one up. And eventually I then met the president, you know, and then it got serious.
And you had to then explain what you were doing. Why did you say you wanted to talk to them?
Well, I basically explained to him that I'm not Conservative, that I have a personal interest in conservatism, but that I was interested in the difficulties that they maybe have in Scotland. And I think that was harmless enough for them, you know. And so they realised that I'm not in for a scandal in case there was one. You know, there isn't one. They're quite boring like that. But I think that's what made me acceptable in their eyes.
Now, what you were interested in was what it was which had led them to become a Conservative in the first place. Mm-hmm. Did you ask them to tell you about the moment when they knew they were going to be a Conservative?
Usually the interesting thing is when they start off telling me their story, they instantly talk about their parents. I think it's sort of, they have to position themselves I am this person because my parents are like that. But Margaret Thatcher figures a lot. For some of them, it would be old philosophers like Disraeli and his traditionalism. That's important for some. School teachers, the aunt, it's everyone's got their own significant person.
So how do they talk about conservatism in relation to Scotland now? I mean, they accept the fact of devolution, presumably, and therefore want to say, but nevertheless, we can still do something for Scotland.
Well, they actually don't talk as much about devolution, even though Scottish independence is a real worry for them at the moment. And they always emphasize that we must get the message out to the people. We're the only unionist party. If it wouldn't be for us, then the union would break apart. But what's more of a worry is Margaret Thatcher and her legacy, the poll tax and all of that. And that really is what Scots, first of all, remember about the Conservatives. You say Conservative, they say poll tax. So they really have to overcome that trauma. And one of my respondents recently said, really, I think that we should just get up and apologize. And I really don't think that we can move on until we've publicly acknowledged that that was a problem. It's more the Thatcher legacy that they're battling with at the moment.
How do they deal with other students? Do they disguise their identity, or do they simply keep away from situations where they might get a hostile reception?
It really depends. There are some who, when I interview them, I try to find secluded locations, but, people will walk by, and whenever someone comes within hearing, they will just stop talking until the person has left again. But then again, there's others who want to be interviewed in a cafe, and whenever they say, and then I became a Conservative, and then I did that with the Conservatives, then I almost feel like, please, could you please just, because it's Scotland, right? In some situations, they will always conceal that they are Tories, but it is, on the other hand, quite obvious to people that they might be Tories. There's public school education. There's, even when they're Scottish, because they went to a private school, they sound extremely English from the south, Devonshire. And so there's not very much that they can do to really conceal that they are Tories. They try.
Presumably, though, if they are ever to regain power, they've got to be a bit more outgoing. They've got to be a bit more extrovert. They've got to be a bit more confident. I mean, are there people come along? I mean, I just wonder if political chiefs come and say, look, you've got to be a bit more confident. You've got to stop whispering in corners. You've got to be a bit prouder.
I think it's these young ones who will actually do that just by themselves. They've got a very good campaign going on at the moment. It's hug-a-Tory. The hug-a-hoodie debate. So for the beginning of the last school year, they printed hoodies that say hug-a-Tory on the back. And at the Freshers' Fair, where all the societies introduced themselves, they offered free hugs to students. And out of all the societies that were present there, they were by far the most popular society because they were the most fun. And I think this is, for them, it's one of the strategies that they use to overcome the label, the stigma of being conservative. They emphasize that, hey, we're just normal people too. They actually say that. We're just normal people too. See the person, not the Tory. It's another thing they say. And then they offer hugs. They emphasize when they talk to the old people at conventions, we're really doing a new thing. We're recruiting people in the pub, And why do they come over to our place? Because we're the most fun people in the pub. And they want to be with us, So I think that the young ones will do something new for conservatism.
It's a self-conscious strategy, is it then? This hug-a-Tory, have fun with Tories.
They're appropriating this discourse that is a little bit negative, and they're making it their own, hug-a-Tory, and they're consciously trying to change the party image. They're doing that for themselves as much as for the party at large. And the old ones, the older Tories, they're really very, very grateful indeed.
Now, your sociological interest in this is to do with identity, isn't it? Tell me what this work then has to say about identity and identity formation.
Well, I believe that their identity is a problematic one because they basically live in an anti-conservative environment. And for young people especially, it's always really important to be accepted by their peers. And especially at a university, that's not an easy given straight away. So what I'm looking at is how they talk about their lives and how they try to glitch over the problems, to smooth it out. they refer to a problem, but at the same time they give an explanation of it that, sort of does away with all the difficulties.
It's not a very sociological question, but it's my last question, Antje. How did you feel about them? Did you feel slightly sorry for them being so beleaguered?
It's an interesting question because it's been a very big problem for me. I was scared to get in touch with them at first. I thought these will be patriarchal little scoundrels, for want of a better word, and they will wonder why I'm not in the kitchen cooking and looking after the children, right? So at first I was scared, and then I realized, well, they're just normal young people. And now I actually see them as beleaguered. However, I don't really have a lot of pity for them because they are coping really well. They could just come up with a myth of, oh, poor us sods, here in Scotland, stupid Scottish people. They don't do that. They face their problems, they tackle them, and they actually do a lot with them in a very creative way. So I think they're all right. And, they don't need pity or sympathy. They just need people to be interested, I think.
And I was talking there to Antje Bednarek in Cardiff.
One of the reasons that I'm kind of definitely going to vote yes is, no offence, but I really don't want the Tories to be in power in Scotland ever. Never, ever, ever.